Okay, so as promised, we've got a Q&A. I've got lots of questions, and without further ado, let's just get into this. Okay, so from @JaneTheJubilant, we've got, what books, films, and music do you like? Are there any of your favourites that you link to Perfume? So books, I feel like this is kind of a given. Perfume by Suskind. I relate that book to the Perfume Blanche Bête by Les Liquides Imaginaires because it was about that time that I was reading the book that I tried Blanche Bête for the first time, and for some reason it just kind of reminded me of that book, so every time I smell it, it sort of reminds me of that book, and every time I look at the book, it reminds me of that perfume. Films, I think Taxi Driver reminds me of Pardon by Nasamato, that kind of chocolate and floral sort of duality. It reminds me a lot of that film. And music, I really like Steely Dan. It doesn't really have anything to do with Perfume, but that's definitely my favourite band. Okay, so we've got, are there any fragrances or fragrance notes which negatively affect you? I'd say sometimes black pepper can make me sort of want to sneeze a little bit, but I'd say that cloves are very hit or miss for me, and I think that they're a very kind of Christmassy scent. I couldn't really wear them any other time than December. Clove is a really nice smell, but again, it's just too Christmassy. And fragrances in particular, I feel like this is a bit of an obvious answer, but Dior Sauvage, it's just, the whole line I feel is really overused, and I don't know, I used to have a little sample of it from Sephora that I used to wear, and those days are over now. Okay, so from @Liam-GD4QI, we've got a bit of a long one here. You come home and catch a whiff of a funny smell. How would you react? Would you need to find it, or would you just try and cover it up? You can't find it and the smell gets worse. How would you go about locating the source? How much would it annoy you? Any good stories about you having to sniff around / follow your nose to the source of a strange smell? Cheers. I'm not trying to hide a body, but good luck with that. Okay, so we've got one from Stella Shaw. In your professional opinion, what's the best way to buy perfume cheap but to get the best quality, or even any tricks or hacks to get free stuff? Okay, so there are a few things that you can do. For example, on Facebook, there are lots of perfume brands that do these promotions where you can get free samples. For example, Initio does that quite a lot. You just sign up and they can send you a bunch of free samples, or a few free samples. Again, with Facebook, you can join some trusted seller groups where people sell their fragrances secondhand, and it's often a lot cheaper than retail price, so I'd really suggest that. And there are also a few discounter websites, for example, Notino, All Beauty, who always have sales on, and it's a lot cheaper than retail price. Okay, so we have a few from Big Bad Y-S2W. What's the earliest smell you remember, and why do you think it stayed with you? So my nan outside her house has a jasmine bush, and I've been smelling that for as long as I can remember, and I just love the smell of jasmine now, and I think that that probably had a big part to do with it. I think that that is probably the earliest smell that has kind of stuck with me, but yeah, jasmine is definitely one of my favourite smells. Okay, another one. If your favourite perfume were a personality, what kind of trouble would it get into? Okay, so my favourite perfume that I haven't made is Lita by Vogue. It's a very smoky, a little bit vanilla-y fragrance, but overall really smoky and kind of fiery. So I think possibly just lighting things on fire, it would get into trouble with that. But yeah, Lita by Vogue, definitely try it if you haven't. And one more we've got, is there a fragrance you wear when you feel vulnerable? What does it give you? I always wear Halfeti Cedar by Penhaligon's. Unfortunately, it's been discontinued, but it's quite a warm, spicy, a little bit boozy, slightly fruity fragrance. It was one of the first niche fragrances that I ever got, and it reminds me of a few years ago when I really started getting into perfume and what an exciting time it was. And I think, yeah, whenever I'm sort of feeling a bit upset or vulnerable, then definitely that's a good fragrance. Okay, so we've got a few questions from @TheLadyCleo. Have you had any funny or embarrassing reactions to fragrances you're wearing? I wouldn't say I've had particularly many funny interactions. However, I have worn some smoky fragrances around people before, and they haven't really liked me for it. But I wear perfume for me, and unfortunately some people don't always agree with my taste. Okay, so we've got another from @TheLadyCleo. What are your fragrance horror stories? Okay, the first time I ever tried Koyam by Autoprosi, I tried it in Liberty in London and I must have put on about 20 sprays of it, and it was very cloying, so much so that it was actually difficult to breathe. It's a great fragrance, but I would not advise spraying 20 sprays of it. Okay, have you ever had any funny or embarrassing reactions to fragrances others are wearing? I don't tend to comment on other people's fragrances if I don't like it personally, although internally I've had some questionable experiences with other people's perfumes. It's just a lot of overused fragrances that I tend to disagree with, although I never bring it up, but I'm always thinking it. Okay, and lastly from @TheLadyCleo, you often showcase some quite eclectic scents on your channel. Where do you hear about them from? Honestly, it's difficult to pinpoint one location. I hear about lots of fragrances on TikTok, although I do tend to take those opinions with a pinch of salt because it's often influencers that are getting paid to talk about these fragrances. But I often just kind of have a look on Fragrantica or Perfume, and I look at interesting notes and fragrances that might be interesting that other people haven't heard of. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I just sit down for half an hour or an hour, just look on Fragrantica or Perfume, and I find out some interesting fragrances that I want to try. And then I try them, and if I like them, I get them. So we have two from @user formerly known as T. First of which, outside of fragrances, what's the worst smell you've experienced? I live next to quite a few fields, and often horse manure is used as fertilizer, and it's not a pleasant smell at all, especially in the summer. I would not recommend. And secondly, are there any weird smells that you really like and that you'd think would be interesting in perfumes? Okay, this might be a bit of a weird one, but I like that kind of solventy smell that you get from varnish or acetone or just ethanol, which is in fragrances, but it usually tends to disappear quite quickly. I think it'd be quite cool if somebody made a fragrance that kind of smelled like solvent, although I know lots of people wouldn't get along very well with that. I think it'd be quite cool to see. Also, tennis balls, I think, have quite a nice smell, weirdly. I don't know if I'd want to wear a perfume that smelled of tennis balls, but I think it would definitely be interesting. Alright, lastly, from Joe Green 5564. If you could open a pub, what would you call it and why? To be honest, I don't really know. I think I would just call it something really stupid. I don't want to take it too seriously, something like the Feral Beast. Like, you know, just something completely random. I don't know, I feel like the Feral Beast would be quite a cool pub. Do you want to go down to the Feral Beast? I think that'd be quite cool. Anyway, I hope that you all enjoyed watching this video. It was a lot of fun to make. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments and I can respond to them. And if you have any other video ideas, let me know and I'll be happy to make them. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.